The winter wind crawled across the Carolina mountains like a starving beast, dragging its claws over the wooden cabin that stood alone against the white wilderness. Inside, the lantern's flame shook in the draft, trembling like it was scared of the dark outside. Elias Ward rubbed his hands together near the dying fire, the orange embers glowing weakly, barely holding on, kinda like he was these days. Outside, the world was frozen solid, every branch coated in ice so heavy it looked like glass ready to shatter. Snow swallowed everything, sound, warmth, even memory. The date carved into the cabin's mantel read December 19th, 1892, but Elias hadn't celebrated anything in years. Not since the fire that took Anna. Not since he watched the life drain from her eyes while holding her hands, knowing nothing in God's world was going to save her. Elias stood stretching his aching back. The floorboards creaked under his boots, old wood complaining like everything else in his life. His horse, a bay mare named Clover, whinnied outside, restless in the cold. He grabbed his coat, the leather cracked and worn but dependable, and stepped into the storm. The wind slapped him instantly, freezing his breath mid-air. Snowflakes stung his face as he trudged toward the stable, muttering curses under his breath that the wind stole away. 2 more logs. That was all he needed. 2 logs would get him and his 12-year-old son Samuel through the night. He bent down, grabbed the logs, and turned back toward the cabin. When something shifted at the edge of his vision, a dark shape sprawled near the tree line. Elias froze, blinked. The snow blurred everything, but there, barely visible, a body lay half buried in the white. Not moving, not breathing. Elias felt his chest tighten. Memories he'd buried, Anna's still body, that terrifying silence, flashed so violently he staggered. But instinct took over. He dropped the logs and ran. The snow grabbed at his legs, pulling, tugging, making every step feel like wading through ice water. The closer he got, the clearer the form became. A woman, face down, clothes torn, dark hair matted with snow, and dragging herself before collapsing. Hey, can you hear me?" Elias shouted, falling to his knees beside her. No answer. He slid his arms under her, shocked at how light she felt. Like picking up grief itself, hollow and heavy all at once. Her skin was dangerously cold, the kind of cold that didn't forgive. He turned her face gently, young, maybe mid-20s, lashes dusted with frost, lips blue, her left leg bent at a wrong, brutal angle. Then her eyelids fluttered. A whisper escaped her cracked lips. "Don't. Leave me." Her eyes rolled back. Elias didn't hesitate. He lifted her, clutching her against his chest, and pushed through the storm toward the flickering glow of his cabin. Snow whipped around them like ghosts trying to claw her away. Inside, the cabin's warmth wrapped around them. Samuel shot up from the table the moment he saw them. What? Who is that?" "Get blankets," Elias ordered, breathless. "Quick." Samuel rushed to the chest without question. That kid had Anna's heart, soft, kind, too good for this cold world. Elias laid the woman near the fire, stripped off her soaked coat, and froze when he saw her ankle properly. Shattered, bruised purple, swollen, broken in ways he didn't want to describe. He wrapped it as best he could, hands steady even though his mind was spinning. Whoever she was, she'd nearly died out there. Her lips trembled. She whispered something too soft to catch. "It's okay," Elias murmured, surprising himself. "You're safe now. Just breathe." Samuel knelt beside him, his face pale. "Pa, is she gonna die?" Elias glanced at the fire, at the broken woman, at the storm screaming outside. "I'm not letting that happen," he said quietly. "Not tonight." Hours passed like days. The wind moaned outside, but inside, the woman's breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks, faint but real, like dawn breaking over snow. Then finally, her eyes opened. Forest green eyes, sharp but frightened, confused but alive. She flinched, trying to sit up. Pain hit her and she gasped. "Easy," Elias said, hand raised. "You're safe." She blinked at him, disoriented. At Samuel sitting nearby with concern in his eyes. At the small room lit by a single lantern. At the fire. Then her gaze returned to Elias, searching him, trying to decide whether he was danger or salvation. She whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trouble anyone. I'll leave as soon as— You're not going anywhere, Elias cut in, his voice harsher than he meant. Your leg's busted, the storm's hell, and you'd die before you reached the door. She swallowed, tears building but refusing to fall. I didn't want to be a burden. You're alive. That's what matters, Samuel said softly. She looked at him, something softening in her expression. What's your name? Samuel asked. There was a pause, then, Lydia, she whispered. Lydia Hart. Samuel smiled, relieved. I'm Samuel, and this is my dad, Mr. Ward, but you can call him Elias. Everyone does. Elias shot him a look. Samuel just shrugged. It's true. Lydia's lips curved in the faintest smile. Thank you, Elias. And hearing his name like that, gentle, grateful, did something to him. Something he wasn't ready to admit. Not yet. He stood abruptly, pretending he needed to check the fire, pretending the sudden tightness in his chest was from the cold and not from the way this stranger's voice felt like thawing ice. The storm howled outside, but inside, something warm began stitching itself quietly, slowly into the frozen seams of Elias Ward's life. And neither he nor Lydia understood it yet. But the night she crawled through the snow toward his cabin, nothing in his world would ever be the same again. The storm faded by morning, leaving behind a world so silent it felt almost unreal. Snow lay thick and untouched, except for the narrow trail Elias had carved the night before while carrying Lydia inside. Sunlight spilled through the frosted window, painting everything in cold gold. Elias sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of bitter coffee. He'd been awake for hours, thinking about Lydia, about the way her voice trembled, about the bruises blooming on her wrists that she'd tried to hide, about how close she'd come to dying right outside his land. He didn't want to care, didn't want to feel anything, but the universe clearly didn't care what he wanted. The door to the small room creaked. Lydia stepped out slowly, leaning on the wall for support. Her breathing quickened when she tried to put weight on her injured leg, pain shooting through her body like fire. Easy, Elias said, standing. You shouldn't be walking yet. I hate lying down, she whispered. Makes me feel trapped. Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from the pain in her leg, from something older, deeper. Samuel jumped up from the floor, where he'd been carving a piece of wood. Lydia, you can sit here, he said, dragging a chair toward the fire. It's warm. She gave him a grateful smile that looked like it cost her something to manage. Elias approached her carefully, not wanting to startle her. Here, he murmured. Take my arm. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, trembling. Even that small touch felt like a confession. He guided her to the chair. She eased down, wincing, clutching her skirt in her fists while trying to hide how bad the pain was. Elias knelt in front of her, gently lifting her injured leg onto a small stool he'd pushed closer to the fire. You patched me up well, she whispered. Thank you. You were half frozen, Elias said. Anyone would have helped, but that wasn't true. People in the mountains had learned to look away from trouble. Learned to survive, not save. Lydia's eyes flickered with something he couldn't read. Doubt or disbelief. Anyone wouldn't have taken me in, she murmured. You did. Samuel watched them silently, his eyes full of questions he wasn't ready to ask. Not yet. Elias cleared his throat, standing. You hungry? He asked. Lydia hesitated, as if even admitting hunger felt like weakness. A little, she said. You look like you ain't eaten in days, Elias muttered quietly. Her cheeks flushed. Shame, not embarrassment. Samuel's head lifted, curiosity and concern mixing. Pa, he said softly. You think she was running from someone? Lydia stiffened. Elias shot Samuel a warning look, but Lydia swallowed hard. He's not wrong, she whispered. Elias slowly sat down across from her. The crackling fire filled the silence between them. You want to tell us what happened? He asked, voice low. Her throat worked. She looked at her hands, thin, trembling, bruised. I was traveling with a group heading west, she said. A family of settlers. They promised safe passage. And? Elias asked. Lydia's jaw tightened. And promises don't mean much when you're a woman alone. The weight in her voice made the air feel heavy. One of the men, Jonas, she said, pausing like the name itself tasted like poison. He didn't take no for an answer. Samuel's face hardened. Elias's hand curled into a fist on the table. He tried to force me into staying close to him. When I refused, he said I was trouble. Said I slowed the group down. Her eyes glossed with tears she refused to let fall. They left me behind. On purpose. Samuel's breath hitched. What about your leg? He asked. Lydia closed her eyes. I fell trying to chase their wagon. The wheel ran over my ankle as they drove off. Elias swore under his breath. These mountains were cruel. But people were often worse. And you crawled? Samuel whispered. I crawled, Lydia said. Crawled until I saw a lantern. Yours. Her voice broke completely this time. Honestly? I didn't even think you'd open the door, she admitted. But I couldn't die in the snow. Not like that. Samuel moved before Elias could say anything. He reached out, gently placing his small hand over hers. I'm glad you came to us, he said. Me and Pa, we don't mind. You can stay as long as you need. Lydia's eyes shone and her lips trembled. You're very kind, Samuel, she whispered. Too kind. Elias stood abruptly, the intensity of the moment clawing at him. Samuel, get her food, he said, voice rough. As Samuel scrambled to fetch the stew, Elias went to the window, pretending to check the weather. But really, he just needed to breathe. He hadn't let himself feel anything in years. Now this woman, this half-frozen stranger, was cracking his walls without even trying. The next day, Lydia tried to help around the cabin. Elias told her not to, ordered her not to. But Lydia wasn't someone who liked feeling useless. She reached for Elias's coat hanging on a peg near the door. I can help mend this tear, she said, fingers brushing the frayed edge. You don't need to, Elias replied. I know, she said gently. But I want to. Let me earn my keep. Earn her keep. Those words twisted something in him. A woman abandoned in the snow shouldn't be talking, like she needed to justify surviving. He opened his mouth to say something, but Lydia placed a calming hand on his sleeve. That storm didn't kill me, she said softly. But doing nothing might. He understood that feeling too well. Doing nothing made you remember. Doing nothing made you feel. Fine, he grumbled. Just take it slow. Your leg needs time. She smiled, small, careful, but real. I'll be careful. But even while she worked, Elias noticed a pattern. Every unexpected noise made her flinch. Every shadow outside made her stiffen. Every time the wind slammed the shutters, her hand flew to her throat. She lived like someone expecting danger, expecting footsteps behind her, expecting the past to catch up. Elias didn't say anything. Not yet, but he watched, and he learned. Days passed in a rhythm Elias hadn't felt since before Anna died. Lydia read from an old book while Samuel listened with wide eyes. She taught him new words, taught him how to pronounce them right, taught him gently, patiently, like someone who'd once been a school teacher. And Elias watched from the doorway, silent, arms crossed, heart betraying him more each day. Every time Lydia laughed, even the tiny, shy ones, it stirred something warm deep inside him. Something he'd buried. Something dangerous. Samuel noticed too. One evening, while Elias fixed the fence outside, Samuel appeared beside him. Pa? Yeah? You like Lydia, don't you? Elias nearly dropped the hammer. What? You look at her the same way you used to look at Ma. Elias turned away fast. The cold stung his eyes. Don't say things you don't understand. I understand enough, Samuel said. And she likes you too. Elias clenched his jaw. This ain't about liking. Lydia's been hurt enough. She needs safety, not more complications. Samuel was quiet a moment. You can be both, Pa, he said softly. Safety and something more. The kid walked off, leaving Elias staring at the snow like it held the answers. Later that night, when Samuel fell asleep early, Lydia sat by the fire alone. She had Elias's coat folded neatly over her knees, mended cleanly. Elias stepped inside, the cold still clinging to him. You fixed it? She nodded, offering him a small smile. See? I'm useful after all. Lydia. He meant to thank her. Instead, he just stared. Really stared at her. The fire painted her hair gold. Her face looked softer, warmer, calmer than the night she arrived. But her eyes, they held storms he didn't know the names of. You don't have to pay us back, Elias finally said. You don't owe us anything. Her smile faded. You say that, she whispered. "But you don't understand what it means to owe someone your life." "I didn't save your life," Elias said. "The fire did. The blankets did. Samuel did. God did. Whatever helps you sleep." Lydia shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "You opened the door." Silence settled between them, thick and fragile. She looked at him with something raw, unguarded. "Elias, I don't know what happens next for me." Her voice broke just slightly. "I don't even know if I'm safe." "You are," Elias said instantly. "In this house you are." She nodded, eyes lowering. "And when my leg heals?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Because he didn't want to say, "I don't want you to leave." And she didn't want to say, "I have nowhere else to go." Their unspoken truths filled the room, warm and terrifying. The fire popped, sparks drifting up the chimney, tiny stars burning themselves out. Lydia's voice softened, trembling. "I'm scared, Elias." He swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." When she lifted her eyes again, he felt something shift in the universe. A quiet click, like fate finding its groove. He didn't touch her. Didn't dare. But he wanted to. More than he'd wanted anything in years. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, a fragile, impossible thread stretched between them. Thin as a hair, strong as hope. Neither of them broke it. Not that night. Not ever. Snow fell again that night, soft and quiet, like the sky finally exhaling after days of holding its breath. Elias didn't sleep much. He lay awake listening to the wind brushing against the shutters, the distant crack of ice shifting in the woods, and the steady breathing of his son in the next room. But most of all, he listened for Lydia. Every time she shifted, every soft gasp of pain, every tiny sigh, he heard it. And each time, something inside him twisted with a mix of worry and something else he didn't want to name. When morning came, pale sunlight crawled across the cabin floor. Lydia sat near the fire wrapped in a blanket, her hair falling over one shoulder, the flames painting her skin in warm golds and soft shadows. She looked almost peaceful, until she didn't. A sound outside shattered the moment. Hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, heavy. Elias stiffened instantly. Samuel looked up, eyes wide. Lydia froze. Not the freeze of surprise, the freeze of terror. Her entire body turned to stone. Elias moved to the window. A single horse approached, steam rising from the animal's nostrils in the cold air. The rider wore a long duster coat, hat low over his face, shoulders thick, like someone who spent his life lifting more than just tools. The man guided the horse to a stop near the fence. "Pa," Samuel whispered. "You know him?" "No," Elias murmured. "But I know trouble when I see it." Lydia's breath hitched so sharply it sounded like she'd been stabbed. Her hand clutched the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her, tethered to the world. "Lydia," Elias said quietly. "You all right?" She shook her head, eyes locked on the shadow outside, as if a ghost from her nightmares had crawled out of the snow. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper carried on fear. "That's Jonas." Elias's stomach dropped. "The man who left her to die. The one she crawled from. The one who hurt her. The one who chased her. And now he was here." Elias's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Outside, Jonas dismounted slowly, tying his horse to the fence like a man settling in for something ugly. Lydia looked like she might pass out. "He won't come inside," Elias said, voice low, controlled. "Not unless I let him." "You don't understand," she whispered. "Jonas doesn't ask. He takes." Samuel swallowed, fear flickering across his young face. But he stood closer to Lydia, instinctively protecting her like she'd become part of their family without anyone saying it out loud. Elias stepped outside. The cold hit him instantly, a slap of winter air. Jonas stood with his back to the cabin, surveying the woods like he owned the land. When Elias approached, Jonas glanced over his shoulder. "Morning," Jonas drawled. His voice was slick, confident, dangerous. Elias didn't respond. Jonas smirked. "Heard you found something of mine." Elias's muscles tensed. "Found a woman nearly dead in the snow," he said flatly. "She ain't property." Jonas tilted his head, amused. "Woman's only got two fates in this world if she's alone. She earns her keep, or she's trouble." "She ain't trouble," Elias said. Jonas chuckled.
Then why's she hidin' behind your door?
She ain't hidin', Elias growled.
She's healing.
Jonas's eyes darkened.
I ain't leaving without her, he said.
She's coming back with me. Over my dead body. Elias snapped before he could stop himself. Jonas smiled slowly, like someone tasting violence on the air. That can be arranged. Elias stepped forward, fists clenched. Jonas didn't flinch. You don't know who you're getting in the way of, Jonas warned. Lydia owes me. She left in the middle of her agreement. I fed her, protected her. Now I'm collecting what's due. Elias's voice went ice cold. You left her in a storm, he said. Broke her ankle under your wagon.
Then you abandoned her like an injured animal.
Jonas shrugged. Weak legs slow the strong. Elias saw red. He lunged. Jonas reached for his gun. The world tightened. Until, "Stop!" Lydia's voice cut through the cold like a whip. She stood in the doorway, gripping the frame for support, face pale, but eyes blazing with something Elias had never seen in her before. Not fear, fire. I'm not yours, she said, voice shaking but sharp. Not your burden, not your property, and not going anywhere with you. Jonas looked her over slowly, his lip curling. That's so, he said.
You think this man's gonna save you? You think he's gonna keep you fed come spring? The world's rough, Lydia. You know that.
She swallowed, but her voice stayed steady.
I know you're rougher, she said, and I know I'd rather die in the snow than go back to your camp.
Jonas's eyes snapped to Elias. This ain't over, he whispered. Then he mounted his horse.
Enjoy playin' house, he spat. I'll be back.
He kicked the horse, disappearing into the trees. Elias stood in the snow long after Jonas vanished, his breath fogged in the cold, heart pounding, hands still shaking with the urge to break Jonas's jaw. When he finally turned back to the cabin, Lydia leaned against the door frame, gripping it so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes locked on his.
Elias,
she whispered. He'll come back. Men like him always come back. Elias stepped closer, voice low, fierce, absolutely certain. Then he'll learn I protect what's mine. The words left him before he could take them back. Lydia inhaled sharply. Her cheeks flushed. Her eyes softened in a way that made something deep inside him tremble. Yours? She whispered. Elias froze. He didn't know what he meant. Didn't know how to fix it. Didn't know how to pull it back. So he didn't. He just looked at her. Looked long. Looked honestly. Looked like a man waking up after years of sleeping through his own life. Samuel spoke from behind Lydia. Pa means you're safe, he said shyly. With us. Lydia blinked hard, nodding, tears slipping down her cheeks silently. Elias stepped closer, lightly brushing her arm with his hand. Come inside, he murmured. Before you freeze. She leaned into him just slightly. So slightly he might have imagined it. But he didn't imagine the way her voice softened. Thank you, she whispered. Inside, the cabin felt warmer than it ever had. The fire crackled. Lydia sank into her chair. Samuel hovered protectively. Elias stared at the door long after closing it, not because he feared Jonas, but because for the first time since Anna died, he feared losing someone again, and that terrified him more than Jonas ever could. The thaw came slow that spring, like an apology the land finally offered after months of hardness. Snow softened at the edges, then retreated, revealing a world raw and too bright with new light. The creek that had been a remembered roar all winter trickled now, singing against stones it had hidden beneath ice. Life uncapped itself like a stubborn bottle. Inside the cabin, the change felt quieter but no less real. Samuel chased shadows in the yard with a wooden sword, laughing in the way that made Elias's chest unclench. Lydia moved about the rooms with a careful confidence, balancing limbs that remembered pain and learning how to trust new strength. She hummed as she worked, simple, tunes she said her mother had taught her, and the sound settled into the walls like a promise. Elias watched them both from the porch some afternoons, hands cupped around a mug until it warmed his fingers. The world had rearranged, itself into a shape he hadn't believed could exist anymore, a household that breathed together. There were gaps, memories that would always ache, and some nights still found him awake, listening to the quiet as if it might swallow him whole. But now those nights held more than sorrow. They held possibility. Jonas's threat had not vanished with the thaw. He'd ridden off that winter, mourning with a hate that tasted like certainty on his tongue. Men like him did not forgive easily, and he carried the kind of pride that bruised other people. Elias expected trouble. He prepared anyway, the way a farmer prepares for a storm even when skies look clear. He checked the fence lines. He buried tools in accessible spots. He learned the routes through the woods like old scars mapping the land. He slept with his rifle near the door. Weeks passed without incident. The town's gossip slowly shifted from sharp whispers at the store to curious smiles when they saw the three of them walking to church together, or when Lydia purchased needles and yarn from Mrs. Patterson's shop. Folks noticed the change, and most of them adjusted, if only with a nod and a muttered comment. Pastor William's blessing had given them something close to cover. Neighbors remembered that a minister had visited and said grace, and that often cooled the fiercest tongues. But Jonas was patient. One afternoon in late April, the breeze carrying the scent of thawing earth and wood smoke, Elias rode toward Miller's Ford to fetch supplies. Samuel sat behind him, knees clinging to his father's hips, hat pulled low against the sun. Lydia waved them off from the yard, her hand small against the bright air, and Elias felt something like a stone loosen in his chest. At the Ford, Elias, did errands and bought things, exchanged small talk, and watched the village with guarded eyes. On the return trail, the trees made a green tunnel, birds loud with the work of building nests, and for a moment the world seemed steady and forgiving. Then he saw the horseprints leading off the path, fresh, heavy, deliberate. Elias stiffened. The hairs rose along his arms. "Pa?" Samuel asked, sensing the change. "Stay quiet," Elias whispered. He nudged Clover into a slow trot and followed where the tracks veered toward a stand of pines. They found the camp quickly. Jonas wouldn't waste time hiding. The fire was small, but the signs were ugly. A scrap of cloth pinned to a twig, the mark of a man wanting to be known. Jonas sat with a jug in his hands, face down, but the moment Elias and Samuel crested the small rise, he lifted his head. Elias dismounted slowly, keeping his rifle slung but not raised in a foolish gesture. Jonas's men, two of them, grim and waiting, stood near the trees like wolf pups, unsure whether to lunge. "You like my territory?" Jonas called. The grin on his face was sharp as a knife. "Ain't much room for charity here, Ward." "This ain't your land to take," Elias said, voice low as the creek. "Leave Lydia be." Jonas laughed, the sound thin and bitter. "Lydia's got debts, Ward. You protect folks who cost more than they're worth." "That's a good trade for you, I reckon." Samuel's fingers tightened on Elias's coat. The boy's jaw set in a way that made Elias's heart break and swell at the same time. So much courage for so small a body. "You ride off and leave a woman to die," Elias said. "You drove over her leg and you left." "You call that debt?" Jonas shrugged. "Survival's got rules. She broke hers. You don't get to make the rules for other people." Jonas shifted and the two men behind him moved like the tide. Danger hummed. "You think," Jonas said slowly, "you and your small cabin can stand against me? Word is you're weak, Ward. Single man, boy, child. People forget quick. Don't expect parish prayers to save you when things get ugly." Elias felt the old thing claw his insides, the reflex to give ground, to avoid a fight that could take everything. But he also felt the new thing. Anger with a salt edge, ready to burn. Not just for him, for Lydia, for Samuel's future, for the idea that violence could decide the arc of a woman's life. He moved forward. "I'm not asking you to leave," Jonas said, suddenly casual and cold. "I'm giving you a choice. Turn her over and I'll walk away. Try and stop me and we bloody the snow with what's left of your pride." Samuel stepped between Elias and Jonas, voice thin but steady. "You won't take her. Not while my pa's here." One of Jonas's men sneered. "Kid's got big talk." Elias saw it then, the way the man shifted, the way his hand went to his belt. It happened too fast. One of the men lunged. Elias blocked him, fists finding muscle and bone years of farm work had built. The other man swung a heavy fist. Elias ducked. Samuel cried out. Jonas reached for his rifle. There was a shot. Wood and wind and blood blurred for a moment. For a sliver of time, the world narrowed to the iron taste of fear and the bright sound of someone falling. When the ringing in Elias's ears died, he stood over the man who'd gone down, breath heaving, hands sticky and trembling. The other man slumped nearby, groaning. Jonas had fled, rode hard and fast away, leaving behind a chaos as sudden and ugly as the wound he'd carved. Elias sank to his knees, palms pressed to the earth, feeling the tremor of life run through him. Samuel flung himself at his father's side, hands searching for reassurance, as if faith could be grabbed and held. "You," Samuel began, voice small. Elias swallowed back the words that wanted to come. Anger, relief, the wild weight of being alive and broken and terrible all at once. "We need to get back," he said finally. "Help these men. Then we go home." They moved like the practiced animals of necessity, dragging the injured to the wagon, tying bandages. The men would live. They always did. But the shape of this day had shifted something. Jonas had struck, and he'd run. Elias knew the man would try again. Men like Jonas rarely accepted defeat. When they rode back, the town gathered at the edge of the road. Faces peered from windows. Pastor Williams led the way to the porch, hat in hand. Folks had seen the scuffle. News runs fast when an honest man stands up and blood gets spilled. "You did what you had to," Pastor Williams said quietly when Elias dismounted. "You protected your own." Elias met the pastor's eyes and found there the quiet, approval he hadn't expected. It felt like a patch stitched over an old wound, ugly but useful. At the cabin, Lydia met them at the door. Her eyes went to Elias first, then to the handkerchief stained with something dark that he still clutched. She flinched at first, and then her face softened in a way no one else saw. Relief, raw and bone-deep, crossed her features like sun through rain. "You all right?" Elias asked, voice ragged. She nodded. "I am now." Samuel let out a breath that had been tied tight in his chest. He ran to his mother's, no, Lydia's, sighed and hugged her like a little man who'd found his anchor. After the men were tended, and the excitement bled away into hushed conversations and whispered condemnations of those who start trouble, Elias found himself sitting near the fire, Lydia across from him. The air smelled of soot and boots, and something like new beginnings. "Why'd you help?" Lydia asked suddenly, voice small. Elias looked at her, really looked, and saw in her face the map of everything this winter had taken and returned. He had no neat answer. "Because I couldn't do nothing," he said simply. "Because you crawled to my fence and I opened the door." She smiled, a faint, tired curve that made him think of Anna and the way she used to press her lips together when she tried to keep from laughing. "You could have closed it," she said. "I could," he agreed. "But then I'd still be sleeping. And Samuel'd be too." She reached out, fingers finding his hand across the table. Her touch was warm, steady. It steadied him in ways he hadn't known he needed. Word of the fight spread through Miller's like kindling. There were conversations at the general store that changed tone when Elias's name passed lips. Folks who had once tilted their heads at the thought of a stranger living with him now nodded and said, "Good man." Some of them stopped by with pans of stew and jars of preserves, Mrs. Patterson bringing a jar that smelled faintly of lavender and awkward pride. Pastor Williams came by too, and they spoke long into an evening that smelled of pine sap and wood smoke. The pastor's words were tempered by something like experience. "You've done right," he said. "Not only for a woman, but for your boy. You teach him what it means to stand." Elias didn't know he needed that confirmation, but he carried it like a secret warmth for days after, something that kept him steady when doubts crept in. The days grew longer. Lizards of sunlight crept along the walls. Lydia's legs strengthened with each sunrise, her walking steadier, her limp a map of regained ground rather than brokenness. She worked with Elias in the small ways that stitched their lives. Together, mending shirts, stuffing pillows, trimming the hedgerow. She taught Samuel arithmetic and stories and the way to hold a needle without stabbing. Your own fingers. He taught her the rhythm of the fields, how to read the soil, how to coax a stubborn patch of ground into giving life. When the first green shot up along the fence line, they decided, quietly, without a pageant, that they would make things official in front of Pastor Williams. Not a crowd-blazing wedding. No bells to ring through the valley. A simple promise stitched close to home, the way their lives had been mended. The morning they chose dawned bright and gentle, the sky a clean place of promise. Pastor Williams arrived with a hymnal and a serious smile. A few neighbors, those who had shown kindness in small, steady ways, came and stood like a chorus of approval. Flowers, wild and unarranged, decorated the simple room, braided by Lydia's own hands and Samuel's small fingers. When Pastor Williams asked if there were any objections, no one spoke. The room held a kind of hush that said what gossip never could. It said that a man who loved his son and a woman who had crawled through snow for life deserved less judgment and more blessing. They said their vows in a voice that trembled only once, when Elias said he would cherish Lydia as he had treasured Anna, not to replace the past, but to honor it while making space for new love. Lydia's eyes shone with tears, and Samuel grinned like a boy witnessing a miracle. They left the pastor's small blessing behind like a talisman. Life didn't change overnight. It rarely does. Sometimes truth is a slow tide, reshaping rock with patient insistence. They kept working. They kept healing. They kept living. Jonas never returned to the cabin after that spring. News carried through that he'd taken to riding roads farther west, living savage and alone. His reputation soured enough that some men avoided his company. People said it was shame that chased him off. Others said ruin. Elias didn't listen to rumors. He tended his fields and fixed his roof and taught Samuel the difference between courage and foolishness. Courage keeps you steady when fear grows loud. Foolishness runs at danger without thinking of what follows. Years stretched like a well-worn blanket. Samuel grew into a young man with his mother's eyes and his father's hands. Lydia's laughter filled the cabin the way sunlight fills a room. Warm, believable, ordinary. They planted a garden by the creek, a small claim of beauty in the world's roughness. In the summers, neighbors came over, some with food, some with news, some with the weather's terrible gossip. The cabin became a place where folks stopped when they needed a patch of kindness. The lamp in the window stayed lit each night, a beacon for whoever might one day need a home. Elias kept the wooden star on the mantel, next to the glass ornament he'd kept from another life, an heirloom of memory and promise. When he looked at it, he didn't feel torn anymore. He felt whole in a way that knew how to hold both grief and joy at once. One night, years later, after the boys had left to walk their own paths and the garden had become a small tapestry of memory, Elias sat in his chair and watched Lydia sleeping across the room, hair silvering in the firelight. He reached for her hand and felt the warmth he'd carried through cold winters, the steady pulse of a life chosen and given and returned. Anna would like her, he said quietly to the empty room, and this time the name did not unmoor him. It held a blessing. He smiled, crooked and soft, and Lydia stirred, lifting her head. "What did you say?" she murmured, half asleep. "Nothing," he said. "Just that I'm grateful." She squeezed his hand, eyes heavy. "Me too," she whispered. Outside, the wind moved through the trees with the same old sound, but it no longer felt like an adversary. It sounded like memory and promise braided together. Elias closed his eyes and let the quiet bend around him. He'd learned how to live again. He'd learned how to love again. In the end, it wasn't a grand miracle, no lightning bolt of destiny, but 1,000 small mercies. A door opened in a storm, a boy's patient heart, a woman who refused to be owned, and a man who finally remembered how to feel. The lamp in the window burned steady that night and for many nights after, and if anyone came crawling through the snow, they would find warmth waiting, hands that would pull them close, and a home where the story of how they'd been saved would be told again and again, simple and true, like a prayer.